Today on Nova Legends podcast, I'm going to have my occasional rant against the VHSL. This was brought on by, I guess, released news of new classifications for certain Loudoun County schools, and there was movement around the state for different schools because of enrollment changes. So, again, we're still trying to find a way to make six classifications fit, and it's not working. And I'm going to try to explain again why I don't think it works. First of all, whenever we talk about six classifications and why we need it, it's usually because, well, it's not fair to small schools. You need schools should play against teams um, that has similar enrollment and have a chance to win titles. And also the growth of number of the schools over time. So if it was three classifications back in the 80s, then therefore it should be six now, which I'm not sure one leads to another, but these are the two reasons that I hear mostly for why we need six classifications. So, if you're going to have six, I guess you're going to have to try to move schools around. And I just moved to Loudoun County, and one of the schools in Loudoun, Freedom South Riding, that was the only school in Loudoun County that was a Class 6A. Freedom is switching places with Independence. Independence is going to Class 6. So they're in with the Prince William County schools, Stafford County schools, and maybe a Fauquier school, but I think it's mostly Prince William. But it's probably the toughest region in the state in terms of athletics. There's 17 schools, I believe, whereas in Loudoun County, you're in a 10-team region in a 5-team district. If you're a Class 5 or Class 4, because we have both in Loudoun. And it's just so much easier to win titles when you're in 5-team districts, 5-team regions. And, nowadays when teams go to the state from around here, it's almost like you had a bad season if you didn't make state. It's really, really that easy for Loudoun County schools. And there's other areas in the state. I think there's a 9-team region down in the Hampton Roads for one of the, so I don't want to just blame Loudoun. This happens a lot. But anyway, the news was that Freedom South Riding is going down to 5. So they're going to be playing against other Loudoun County teams. John Champ is going up from 4A to 5A. So they had been at 6A and they went down to 4A, and now they're going back to 5. And Independence, which is a newer school in Brambleton, Loudoun County, it's taken Freedom's place in 6. So it's going to be sitting to that gauntlet and play against in that 17-team region with mostly Prince William teams. So this was caused by looking at enrollment between freshman and junior classes at these schools. And there's probably a 50 student swing per class that made these changes needed, I guess. And it's baffling to me because anyone who lives here will realize they're building a lot here. So it's going to constantly be changing. They're building new developments. So we're going to constantly be moving schools up and down. And also I guess they're going to be redistricting as well as people fight over where my kid goes to school. So we're going to constantly have this happen. Schools are going to change enrollments. And I think people are going to feel like there's a need to switch them. Well, I think there would be a less need to switch teams if there were less switch schools, if there were less classifications, because then you could loosely group them by enrollment numbers. You wouldn't have to try to thread the needle and try to create these smaller classifications, which makes it harder to group schools locally. What happens when you move schools around is you're not letting these rivalries grow and build. A lot of these are newish schools. They're all new compared to some of the old, Loudoun County only had 4 schools when I was in high school in Fairfax County. Now I think there's 22, 23. So, you're not letting any of these rivalries develop. That's what develops rivalries, when you have some history. When I was growing up, the Northern District, we knew who was in the Northern District. We did have change as well in Fairfax because there was building going on there, but it wasn't like it is now. So Loudoun is going to keep changing, and I'm sure the rest of the state is going through the same thing. And it's going to mandate, if you have 6 classifications, constantly revisit that. So that's one of the reasons why we don't need 6 classifications. It's ridiculous. We're not letting these rivalries grow. We don't need 6 classifications because it doesn't matter that much if you change enrollment size, 50 kids per class. Obviously, there is a size. There is going to be a threshold where it does matter. And if a school is, let's say, a population of 500 and you're going against schools with 1,500 total, it's going to be hard for you to compete in some sports. But having three classifications, maybe four, you're still going to prohibit that. But you're going to be able to group teams locally much easier. So you're going to have shorter bus rides to games. You're going to have rivalries in the area. Hayfield is going to play Lewis, even though they have different enrollments, much different enrollments. But you're going to keep those rivalries if you have schools that are loosely grouped together and with bigger classifications. It's going to be easier to do that. Don't forget, in the old days, all of Richmond was AAA, which was the highest. And, so all those rivalries existed, like the city schools. There was Armstrong, there was Kennedy, there was Thomas Jefferson, Marshall Walker. No matter what size they were, they all played in the biggest classifications. Now, obviously, those schools are very small now, and it can be tough on some sports. But the point is, the history was there, and the Tidewater was the same thing. All those schools were the biggest classifications, so we knew who the top teams were. We knew where the rivalries were. They were in the same districts, so there's history. So we're losing history by trying to have 6 classifications. So why are there 6 classifications? Well, the reason why this came to be is back in the mid 80s, and I learned this from Coach Mickey Thompson from Stonebridge, is that football teams were being left out of the postseason because only the division winner qualified for postseason. Football is not a tournament sport, so it's playoffs. There's no districts and regions. It's just playoffs. So, teams felt like they're having these great seasons. They're being left out. I know Robinson, when I was at Robinson, our football team was great. And there was a 3-year span where we were second all 3 years. And it was brutal. We had Hall of Fame nominee, NFL Hall of Fame nominee, Chris Warren on our team, and other great players. And we were losing to great TC Williams teams and Woodson teams and other great teams. So there was people complained because there was no chance to get in the postseason. So when they brought 6 classifications, that did increase the number of schools that were qualifying for postseason. Well, eventually, as the story goes, other sports wanted to have 6 classifications, but it didn't make as much sense in most sports because they're tournament sports. So even if you didn't win the regular season, you still had the tournament to qualify. And eventually, over time, they changed formats, so more than one team was qualifying per district anyway. So if you're a basketball team in Northern Virginia and Arlington, Fairfax, Alexandria, 4 teams per district generally were qualifying for regionals. So it's not like you really needed 6 classifications just to qualify for postseason. You had a second bite of the apple anyway. So when you increase the classifications to 6 and you have 4 teams qualifying for postseason, in some districts, all teams in the district will qualify for regionals. You're having these huge postseason tournaments. Football, as we've talked about, it's interesting because there were teams that were winless that were qualified for postseason last year. One of them lost to Phoebus in the postseason. I think they lost by 100 points. And, for us to keep letting this happen, it's pretty outrageous. So anyway, that's the reason why we got 6 classifications. It probably doesn't make sense for most sports. Football, it makes the most sense back in the old days because only one team was qualifying for the postseason. But you could just increase the postseason. You could just increase the number of teams per district that qualifies, and you're fine. What's happening now, again, in Loudoun County, where I am, teams are getting buys now in the postseason and playoffs. So Stonebridge, as great as they are, don't have to do much to get to state. Right now they're 0-3, but if they right the ship and finish in the first or second in their district, they'll be in great shape to make another state run. So all's good. So I'm not sure if this is the way we want it. So look, should we go back to 3 classifications, maybe 4? And why would it make sense? Now, we're going to always again say, we want people to be successful. Some of the greatest moments we have when we're in high school is when we make those district title runs, regional title runs, and we go to state. We want more people to experience that. More principals want it because the school's happy. Everyone's happy because they make these runs. I guess you can argue that there's more games, so there's going to be more attendance. I don't know about that. I think if you go back and look at some of the fan bases back in the old days where the regular season games meant more, I think you could probably argue that more games mean you're going to get more attendance along the way. And I definitely know with all the classifications when we separate, the great teams. Um, if John Marshall had to play Hayfield in basketball, John Marshall was a 2A state champion the last 7 years or whatever. If they had to play the 6A champ Hayfield last year with South Lakes, you can't tell me that game wouldn't get 10,000 people. So the fact that people say you're making more money, I've never been convinced of that, but I'm sure the economics are out there somewhere. So, but also we're just hurting the rivalries. Again, I mentioned Loudoun County, we're moving teams in and out. Um, we're not letting rivalries form. Um, and we want to have those districts of local teams when we can. And we don't want teams having to travel 20 or 30 miles away to play. If they can play the local teams where there's joint culture in this history, we can always play those teams 30 miles away in regionals. But we're hurting the ability to do rivalries when we move South Riding back out of 6 and into 5. When John Champ moves again from 4 to 5 after moving from 6, and then Independence goes to 6 and play teams they never played before. So we need some stability. It's easy to get stability if you have less classifications because there's less, the groupings of enrollments are larger. We're also hurting competition. In football, Phoebus is probably the top team in football now. They're in class 4. I think they have like a 37-game winning streak, a couple state titles in a row. They've beaten Highland Springs this year, a perennial 5 champ. They were the 6 runner-up last year. Well, Phoebus is great in the 4. Maury was great in class 5, defending state champion. Last year, Freedom Woodbridge was the state champion in 6. They never got a chance to play. And these are the best teams because they're in different classifications. I mean, we're hurting our chance to see these great teams. And this is another reason for the great players to stay with the public schools and not go to private if we had a chance to put these teams on the same platform. So we're hurting our ability to do that. Can you imagine in basketball if John Marshall wasn't playing in class 2 and it's national caliber team, if they're playing against the great teams, but at least they should be playing. If we had a medium classification of the 3, if they were the old AA, at least they play teams from the city. Right now they're playing high schools from farm country in Appalachia, and it's just I don't know how happy we're going to be to watch them beat teams in the state final by 70 points and watch these poor kids have to drive 6 hours home for a bus ride after getting beaten by 70. How much longer are we going to have that happen? But anyway, we're not allowing our great programs to play by having 6 champions. 3, maybe 4, we're more likely to have these great games. And it's only one more game to win the state championship. By eliminating 3 classes, you're just adding one more game. It's not like teams have to do that much more to be state champions, but obviously you are adding to the caliber they're going to face along the way when you collapse into larger classifications. I think you're also hurting history. I'm a fan of the state basketball tournament, and I could name probably all the state champions offhand from the 80s, and I haven't written this down, but let me try right now. In 81, Robert E. Lee Springfield won the state championship in AAA. 82, 83, I believe Marshall Walker won. 84, Jefferson Huguenot with won. I believe 85 and 86, Booker T. Washington won. 87, I know Alonzo Mourning from Indian River won because they beat my high school, Robinson. 88, I believe, was Patrick Henry, one of the best teams I've ever seen playing in Virginia. 89, I believe South Lakes went down there, and I believe that must have been Hampton that won the state championship. I believe maybe. And then 90, I think it was the team from Norfolk, a Bayside. If I'm wrong, leave that in the comments. I could be wrong. But anyway, and I know in double A, Martinsville had won 3 or 4 or 5. In single A, I know Drury Mason won a few. But Cumberland had won 1 or 2. But we had history. So the state tournament, like for example, if you wanted to win the double A, you had to go through Martinsville. You had to go through Robert A. Lee Stanton. We had history. There was going to be some in single A. It was Drury Mason. It was a Martinsville suburb. Great athletes, great teams. Cumberland always had great athletes. And in AAA, the Tidewater area was going to be stacked with great teams and all those great teams. But in the 80s also was a time for Richmond to be on top because we had those school complexes. Jefferson Huguenot with, we had Marshall Walker. And so the greatest basketball teams were going to be in AAA were going to be in Richmond and then the Tidewater area. And girls basketball was going to be Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia was amazing in girls basketball. So we had perspective, we had history. Now we don't have anything. We don't know class 2. We knew John Marshall has a stacked team, but we don't know what's going to come out of any class in a particular year. I couldn't name any other of the champions generally, even though I know Hayfield and South Lakes have won the recent class 6 because I interviewed the coaches and I've kept up. But it's hard to keep track of all these champions. I tried to write them down one time and post them on my Facebook page. There's just too many champions. So we've lost all that history by trying to have too many winners. So if we can contain the number of classifications, we're going to increase the amount of history and the games are going to mean more. And we're going to have more neutrals, more fans of the game that are interested. Right now, when you have 6 classifications, all that are interested mainly in going to games are people that go to that school or supporters. You're not going to have as many fans of the tournament of high school sports, generally. But I think in the end, we need to remember that success is so much more than just the population of school. Yes, it matters some, but like, for example, in Northern Virginia, Lewis High School is one of the best programs in soccer in the state. Lewis is not a big school, but they have John Millward took over that program, soccer program, has just turned it around. And some of the programs in the school have struggled, but he has turned the soccer program around because he's built the culture and he knows how to get the players to come out. Most of winning still rests on other factors other than school population. School population is going to make everything a little bit easier if you have, but also, of course, the demographic. If you have demographic of a lot of kids, if it's soccer, if you have a lot of Latino kids, that may help your demographic for soccer. If you're a urban school, obviously in the past that's helped in basketball. The richer schools have done well for lacrosse and baseball, cross country. So the demographic does matter. Leadership matters. Principle matters. There's so much more that goes into it. So we don't want to rest all on just population. Trying to create these classes based on population, school population enrollment, it's not working. There's so many other things. Therefore, reduce the number of classifications. It's not that important, but it's important. Go from 6 to 3, go back, admit failure. So it's not working. We'll stop us having to announce every 2 years that we're moving schools. You're hurting the ability of high school sports to be really special and to really mean something again. So, whenever I get these articles, I read them, but it's just it's sad because I think people mean well, but they're not helping high school sports. They're not helping kids. They're not helping coaches. They're not helping fans. Good intentions maybe, but we need to do an analysis. And money is important, but with money, with prestige, with history, there are ways we can create tournaments and playoffs cost effectively to get huge crowds and really generate interest in these sports and stop the madness of moving schools up and down, switching districts, and having a school like South Riding go from a comfortable, cozy, coming from going to Loudoun County to a comfortable, cozy 5-team district, 10-team region, from a gauntlet of Prince William County where they had a 17-team region and eight and 17 districts. And we're throwing independence into that gauntlet. We got to stop that madness. It's not fair. Those Freedom and Independence are what, 2 miles apart, 3 miles apart? They should be in the same district. These are the same kids. We need to stop the madness. We need to help high school sports. Thanks for listening.